On today's show, in preparation for the brand new Wolverine film, we are talking about some of the best ever Wolverine graphic novels. Okay, so you seem to really enjoy when we talked about a lot of Superman graphic novels in preparation for that film.
And we enjoyed talking about them as well.
And reading them.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't have read them otherwise.
Yep.
So we thought we would go through
Do it again.
and talk about some of the best Wolverine books in preparation for the new Wolverine film.
Yeah.
It made sense.
It does.
Why not?
Perfect sense
What's
to
the
me.
first one we're talking about?
Well, before we get to that.
Okay.
How are you feeling about the Wolverine film?
Do you know what?
You've had 2 misses so far.
I have had 2 misses.
Are you excited for the new Wolverine film, or?
Do you know what? Same with Man of Steel. Like, I just hope. I hope that it's good. You know, it's set in Japan, which is obviously very closely connected to Wolverine, as we'll talk about today, I'm sure. But we can only hope, right?
Very true, very true. Okay, so we will jump into it with the first graphic novel, which is Wolverine and Kitty Pryde. Now, this book was written in the, I want to say, late 80s?
I think it was late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. And it's written by Chris Claremont.
Yeah.
And it's a short 6-series title, and it's all about, primarily it's all about the relationship between Kitty and Wolverine. Kitty goes out to Japan, she gets in some trouble, Wolverine has to go and help her out.
Yeah.
That's kind of basic premise without spoiling anything. So in this you get his ties to Japan, you get a bit about his past life and his mentoring, and you also get to see his relationship with characters like with Kitty Pryde, and subsequently similar characters he had that relationship with, such as Jubilee and Rogue. Always that kind of nurturing father figure. So Dan, what did you think of Wolverine and Kitty Pryde?
Well, first of all, let me say this. If you, like me, because you were the one who put this title in front of me.
Yep.
And if you, like me, sort of thought, oh, late 80s, early 90s X-Men, that could be really heavily expositional and annoying, and it's one of the better ones.
Yeah, definitely.
It's very, very readable. It does feel quite long. There are some passages that you skim through, but for the most part, it's quite readable. But I think the very, very best part about this is exactly what you said. It's, first of all, Wolverine and Logan's tie to Japan.
Yeah.
Which is so heavily present throughout Wolverine's history. Him loving Japan and him having trained there.
It's very beautifully explained in this.
It's really well done, isn't it? And he feels very at home there. He's wearing some ridiculous clothes, which I don't buy. But it's really, really well explained and well explored. And you just get a feeling that that's his second home. And I always like that about Wolverine. And that's a huge part of his character, which comes through here. The other part, as you also said, was his sort of paternal nature.
Yeah.
You know, everyone thinks about Wolverine as this killer, but really, throughout his history, he has been this paternal figure.
Yeah.
Originally, it was to Kitty Pryde. When we sort of moved on to the mid-90s and the X-Men cartoon and things like that, it was Jubilee. In the film, it showed it as Rogue. Nowadays, of course, it's taken a bit of a twist, and it's Quentin and Quire. We've got this sort of father...
I was unaware of that.
Yeah, we've got this sort of father-son
Yeah.
thing going on with Wolverine and Quentin and Quire, which is really interesting. And so he, you know, it's the whole thing about Wolverine. He's this sort of lovable rogue type of character, and he's aggressive and all that. So that's all there, and that's very nice.
Yeah.
And the Kitty Pryde stuff's cool, and it's well written in parts. But you know, do you know what else was really interesting about this book? Some of the layouts in this book.
Really interesting.
Really creative and interesting, and I think probably ahead of their time. And I think if I'd have read this as it was coming out at the time, amidst all my other reading pile, I would have been like, wow, this is really cool and interesting.
Yeah.
It's very comic booky still. It's very of the era still. But some of the layouts and the way the panels are positioned and that kind of thing, it's really, really quite interesting. So it's definitely worth a read. It's definitely worth a read. And when I started, I wasn't sure if it would be. But it really is. This surprised me, this book, and it is a bit dry in parts, and it can feel like a bit of a slog, but at the same time, it's very, very enjoyable, and there's a lot to like, and all of the great parts about Wolverine are in this book.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say this book was probably about one issue too many. Like, it could have stopped at 5. But overall, I agree with everything you said. My personal favourite moment was the almost the training montage with Kitty and Wolverine, and, you know, Wolverine's whole, you know, just get up, you can do it. If you don't want to, tough, you're going to die. You know, it's kind of that tough love attitude of Wolverine, as you mentioned, which is so endearing about the character and so great. You know that Wolverine's a man who's had a really troubled past and a really horrible past, and it's always cool to see him not be bitter about it, but instead embrace that and try and make sure that others don't suffer the same fate, and that they have someone there to guide them and mentor them. And I think it is really a great trait about Wolverine. So yeah, no, I agree with pretty much everything you've said there. So we'll move on to the next book,
which is Get Mystique by Jason Aaron and Risso. Edward Risso? Not Edward.
Let's just go with Risso.
Risso. And it's basically, it's exactly what it says on the tin. Wolverine is trying to get Mystique.
She's betrayed the X-Men, and Cyclops hasn't sent the X-Men to get her. He's sent
Wolverine
because
and also
he needs the dirty job doing.
It's sort of their past and you know how they've run it. I have a question for you. We'll leave it for later.
Oh, don't ask.
It's sort of like, because the early part of this book, which shows Wolverine and Mystique's past, which Mystique ages, right? This was like, I didn't know Mystique didn't age because it was set like in the 40s.
It's 20s.
20s.
Late 20s, early 30s.
And Mystique was fine, so she doesn't age.
Supposedly not. That was a new one to me as well.
That was weird.
Yeah.
Felt
I can
strange.
buy it. Makes sense.
Does it?
Yeah, she's a shapeshifter, so even if she was getting older.
You wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
But still, that means she would be like 80 in the Monday, and some of the shit that she does, you'd be like, couldn't do it when you were 80. Anyway. How did you find Get Mystique?
I love this.
Okay.
Jason Aaron has such a great grasp of the character of Wolverine. He does a lot of creators, and it was very present in Wolverine and Kitty Pryde. You know, whenever he gets hurt, it's like, oh, I got hit with that shuriken, but it's fine because my healing factor will take care of it. It hurts like hell, but I'll just try and block it out.
Yeah.
But like, Wolverine gets riddled with bullets in this one. He's laid out, and he's just like, okay, so I'm going to tell you exactly how this feels and how weird this is and how horrible this is for me. And I really like that aspect. I also liked this kind of creating a relationship between him and Mystique. I thought that was a really good idea. Interesting that one of my favourite panels is the opening with Cyclops and Wolverine, and the way, you know, Wolverine's like, so am I going after him? She's like, yeah, I'd like you to take the X-Force. And it's that X-Force job, because we ain't taking a prisoner.
Which is interesting because obviously Aaron wrote a lot of the Avengers vs. X-Men stuff, and and Schism, and he's very heavy in plot on that, so it's interesting just seeing that little bit of Scott Summers that he's planting for much further on. Like,
but it is that attitude, like, it's happened a few times now where, and it's not just the X-Men, it's the Avengers as well, they're like, ooh, this is a job Captain America can't be seen doing. We're gonna ask Wolverine and the X-Force to do it.
Let's just take a little sidetrack, because I have an interesting question here.
Sure.
Well, I mean, I took my own home, but I think it's interesting. This whole thing about Wolverine is the guy that gets the jobs done that the more clean-cut superheroes can't do.
Yeah.
Is a premise, and it often really annoys me because they say that, but then no one ever likes to show him killing. Like, what is that? Like, even in Wolverine Kitty Pryde, it's like, oh, he's the big badass, and he's gonna kill, and he's not scared to kill, but he doesn't kill. And then in this book, right at the end, I'm gonna kill Mystique.
Spoilers!
Well, fuck off, it's 5 years old. But like, But you know what I mean? Like, we never really see him killing anyone of importance. And it's always like, oh, Wolverine will kill, he doesn't give a shit, and then he never kills, because that's what a villain does.
That's not on Wolverine's character, that's on Marvel can't really kill characters off, because suffers.
But it's not just Mystique. Like, even when we were in Wolverine Kitty Pryde, with this big villain guy, Ogun.
Or whatever his name is.
Yeah? So, like, we get to this thing, and the whole thing is, like, gonna kill it. Oh, no, you can't kill him, because then you'll be just as bad as him. Captain America would have said exactly the same thing. He could have done the job. Whereas, really, you think Wolverine, a character like him, this is a dangerous guy. He's messing with a lot of people. I'm going to stab him through the face.
Yeah, but there was the whole relationship there between the two of them.
It's an annoying part of Wolverine for me.
That's fair. It's something that I really like, that attitude that, oh, we can't do it. We'll send Wolverine to do it. I really like that.
Yeah, but they never follow through on it. They never commit on it.
But that's
whatever.
Here or there. Yeah, no, I loved this book. I think the artwork was fantastic. Like, captured Wolverine perfectly. You know, the right length of the claws, the right outfit, all that. Loved it. And for me, my favourite panel in the whole thing has to be just after the Mystique setup, where it's like, you know, you're not quite sure what she's doing. Like, it looks like her clothes are almost evaporating, and you've turned the page over and it's like, you want me? Come and get me, Logan. And it's Mystique with all these guns and belt bullets and stuff. It was just, like, so badass. You're just like, yeah, we're getting a fight. But I love this. It really showed Wolverine as a hunter as opposed to just a hack and slasher, which I think is great. Yeah, so I really enjoyed this book.
Yeah, for me, it was a fun romp. Like,
yeah,
it was fun, but it wasn't anything special for me. Like, it does some really cool things. Like, we see some great uses of Mystique's power. We see some great uses of Wolverine's power, and it's just like lighthearted fun.
Yeah,
I think it's sort of a forgettable story, but at the same time, it's not a bad story. It was very fun. I think, like, it was a very classic looking Wolverine.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
You know, it was a decent looking book. Like, I had a good time with this completely, but ultimately, it wasn't just like, oh, you know, it wasn't like, oh, this is amazing or anything like that.
Fair.
It was just sort of like, just good, solid, fun romp. If you want a nice Wolverine story, not think too much about it, read it quite quickly, this is the one.
Fair enough. Well, if you want one that you can read quite quickly, the final book we're talking about is a book called Logan by Brian K. Vaughan, and this again was written in 2008. And the basic premise of this book is Wolverine's gotten his memories back after Schism, and he remembers some stuff, and he's going to go and sort it out. But we kind of see the majority of the narrative played through flashback until the last issue, where we're finally confronted with the present. That's, again, the basic premise of it. Dan, what did you think of Logan?
You know what? I picked up my first Brian K. Vaughan book probably about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
When I read the first... Actually, you know what? Actually, I think my first thing might have been Saga.
I think it was Saga.
Yeah?
Yeah, you read Why the Last Man.
So that's only 8 months ago then.
Yeah.
And since then, I've read 2 volumes of Saga. I've read Why the Last Man. I've read Private Eye. I'm really looking to read Runaways. I think I've read some other bits and pieces here and there.
Yeah.
I've never read a Brian K. Vaughan book that's anything less than incredible and fantastic and different and interesting, and this is no different.
Yeah.
That man has so much fucking talent, I hate him.
You hear?
I want to see him write a novel or something. Like, his prose, his narrative pieces are so beautiful.
Yeah.
They're so well written. And, he's just so talented. And this book is stunning. It looks great. It's, if you had one criticism, it would be possibly it's a little over-sentimental. But, you know...
The first kind of chunk of it does end on a, welcome to... Wah, wah.
Yeah,
Guess what's coming next issue?
It's a little flowery and it's a little sentimental, but I think he earns it. His writing is so beautiful, and out of the 3 books we read this week, this was absolutely my favorite because I think we had all parts of Wolverine. Like, we have the other part of Wolverine, which we had in the Get Mystique as well, which is that this is a man who's lived for a long time, and this is a man who's got a very thick history. We got that in the Keep Pride one as well. Yeah. It's kind of a consistent thing.
That's one thing I do like about Wolverine. He's a man he's old. He is old.
He's super old, and he's been through a lot of stuff. And I just think this is really beautiful, and it deals with some historical events. You know, a lot of Wolverine stories, as we'll find out in, I'm sure, weeks to come, are historical.
Yeah.
They're set in very, very real times, in wars and times of conflict and things like that, and this is no different. I really, really loved this book. I really loved it. I read it digitally, and I'm gonna buy the trade probably because I really loved it. It was very, very pretty and enjoyable and moving, and it says all the things about Wolverine that you would ever want a comic book to say for me.
Yeah, pretty much can't add much to that. You've pretty much nailed it all right there. It's an absolutely stunning book. It's so well written. I really like the use of the villain of the book, just because I didn't see it come until the last issue. I didn't realise, I didn't connect the dots until we got there. And I always love it when, you know, a writer can do that, and an artist as well. They can kind of keep it suppressed until, surprise! If you'd been paying attention, you'd actually have seen it, almost. Which I think's, it's fantastic. It was a really great story, nice and short as well. You know, there's no.
It's poignant though.
Unlike Kitty Pryde, where, as I said, there's could have been one issue less, or even when we talked on Monday about Batman Inc. and it's this could do being a bit shorter. This has 3 issues, and it uses 3 issues perfectly.
I think that's what Brian K. Vaughan is best at, is
knowing how much time he has.
Utility.
Yeah, definitely. I think this book was absolutely outstanding. You should go and read it.
Definitely.
It was great.
Definitely. So quick, so easy to read, so poignant, says everything you want a Wolverine book to say.
Yep. Cool. All right, so that'll do us for the first part of our reading list. We are going to do 2 more.
Yep.
2 more parts. So let us know in the comments what you thought about it. Is there any books you want us to be reading? Do let us know. Also, don't forget to give us any questions that we can answer on next Friday's
we're doing
episode.
A Q&A next week, so any questions you've ever wanted to know, leave them in the comments below.
Also on Twitter, @ComicBookShow1.
And don't forget to join us on Friday for a brand new game, which doesn't have a name yet, but will by Friday.
Woo!
We will see you then. Risso.